Many parents, they want their 11-year-old to train how LeBron James is training right now. Well, guess what? LeBron James didn't train how he did now when he was 11.
That's Kelli Brightwell. She's a global strength and conditioning lecturer and is an absolute authority in anything strength and conditioning. One of her topics today is the LTAD model, and Kelli is one of the experts who literally teaches the world how to use it.
There's like a little spark in certain skills and ability at certain phases of development.
Can the LTAD model explain how some kids are champions when they're kids, but when they go to college, their performance is pretty subpar?
Yeah, of course. Well, first, a big concept with LTAD, which is long-term athlete development models, is a big key thing is it's going to talk about each developmental stage. Okay, so the main 3 developmental stages for youth is going to be your pre-peak height velocity, your circa or mid peak height velocity, and then your post-PHV. Okay, peak height velocity is the greatest rate of adolescent growth. We're growing as a kid always, but this is the greatest rate in change. Okay, and this typically happens around puberty because hormones are released that act on our tissues, brain, and body to cause these rapid changes. Okay. So it's going to address what needs to happen in each of those developmental stages, okay? So in a way, yes, it can explain, because what happens is kids that are late developers, okay, they have a lot more time to train the skills that are in the bucket of the pre-PHV and circa PHV kids because their development is delayed. Whereas those early developers that mature really quick and seem like hosses and studs, let's say out on the field or court, in late middle school, they're just tearing it up, okay, leaving everybody in the dust. Well, they developed early, so they actually had less time to develop technical skills, their limb speed and frequency, let's say in a sprint. They had less time, but now they're just playing off of their physical prowess of just pure brutal strength and size, but it happens too soon.
So is it a matter of when you're younger, work on skills? Like that's the most important time to work on your neurological part of the sport?
Precisely. That is where the technical skills, the motor development of the neuromuscular system has a spurt, okay? So one thing that people don't understand is in order to have muscles, you have to have the neurology, the nerve signal going to those areas to develop muscles, right? And so the neurology is prime in development in those early years. So we want to play on that. My mentor, Lance Walker, he used this analogy that there's like a little spark in certain skills and abilities and different buckets of athleticism at certain phases of development. Are you going to let the flame die out, or are you going to pour gasoline on those certain flames? So it's important for those that work with youth to understand where are those little sparks, where are those little flames, so we can dump the gasoline on it when there's many trainers and coaches that they might be well-intentioned, have good intentions, but they don't know what that is. So they put all their eggs in the basket of trying to grow muscles because the kid looks small. They don't have the capability to do that yet because they need the neuro behind that first. Or they need to push a bunch of heavy sleds because they look slow. Well, their neurology is still developing. Okay, we can do some other methods to help increase the rate in which the stride frequency or the reduction of ground contact time, for say, of speed, which is used in most sports. Okay, so that is a huge understanding and a piece that needs to be understood. Additionally, there's a psychological factor to it. They have a lot more time to develop this kind of psychological toughness. These maybe late developers, these small kids that develop later on in life, they're up against the big boys and girls. So they're going to get some mental toughness. They're going to have to push themselves to play with these big boys and girls. And then suddenly their adolescent growth spurt happens maybe in early high school, and they've got these really refined skills, and now the big strength, the big power, the limb size starts coming into play, and they overtake those peers that might have developed early.
So there's this really popular swimmer. You probably heard of him. I don't know if you've heard of him, but his name's Michael Andrew. He's one of the case studies that people keep talking about where when he was in age group, he was crushing everyone because his coach was training him with race pace. But when he got older, he couldn't keep up with everyone because his aerobic capacity was trash. Such a talented athlete. I mean, if you are a coach, right, if you are doing it the right way and you know that your kids won't be top notch at that stage, how can you be content in saying, well, they're not awesome right now, but I know down the road they're going to be.
How can we be content is we do the training the right way, and we have to trust the process. We have to embrace the journey. And sometimes that's tough for parents and athletes to accept that you got to keep working hard and that you can't give up and that you can't drop out of this thing, and that we would rather try and fail rather than not try at all. But there's no way there's going to be failure if we have this progressive plan and we follow the long-term athlete development models appropriately. It's going to be the safest route with the least amount of burnout, with the least amount of injury, and enhance a multitude of elements of athleticism in the right series of events. So as a coach, speaking to a sport coach, to a parent, or to an athlete, we've got to remind them of these things. And in fact, some of the greatest athletes out there were multi-sport athletes. And also, many parents, let's take basketball, for example. They want their 11-year-old to train how LeBron James is training right now. Well, guess what? LeBron James didn't train how he did now when he was 11. He was playing pickup basketball. He was playing all kinds of different sports. He was being an athlete and having fun and seeing what he can improve on a day-to-day basis and learn something new and make some more friends in every different kind of sporting situation. I can guarantee you that's what was happening with him. So you got to remind people that the professionals, we don't want to train kids like the adult pros are training right now. Guess what? They didn't train this way when they were your age at 11, 12 years old.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like parents are sometimes like the bottlenecks, right?
Yeah.
You said pre, circa, and post. Do you have like some general exercises that they should be doing for each stages?
Right. So let's briefly talk about those stages a little bit more. So we can figure out and determine where each individual lies, okay? Because there's average. Long-term athlete development models are based on the average kid. But what if you have a suspicion that your kid is not average? They might be an early or late developer. Well, we're going to need to either train down or train up according to what it says on the models, okay, that are established. So there's a couple different ways to determine where they are in their developmental stage. The one that I'm the most familiar with and use the most is the Meerwald equation. It was developed by Dr. Robert Meerwald. Basically, he found correlative findings with the developmental stages that we can see in bone structures of kids. And he made this crazy logarithmic equation that determines, okay, we're going to take your full height and your seated height, age, gender, things like this, put it into the equation, and it is this correlative equation based on dental or wrist bone x-rays, which is how we can determine someone's biological or skeletal age rather than their chronological age, because we can look at one 12-year-old and he may look way different than another 12-year-old boy. Okay, because of the different rates in which everybody grows and develops. So once we find that out, we know that the average girl is going to hit her peak height velocity around 11 years old. And the average boy is going to hit it around 13 years old. These equations tell you when the kid is going to hit their peak height velocity. So what if it comes out, this equation, that a boy is going to hit their peak height velocity at 11 instead of 13? Wow, we don't have much more time to develop these skills. Okay, the window of opportunity is starting to close, or the zones of adaptation, those flames are getting smaller. So we don't have much time. It's crucial to get this guy developed. Or what if we see that instead of 13 years old, he's going to be a late developer, 15? Whew, we've got a lot more time to develop this stuff before it drops, and that he's going to be, like a young adult, start developing more into an adult. Okay. So that's how we can understand who goes in what category. So, well, there's all these elements of athleticism, or what we call buckets. Okay. So some of the buckets may be skill. Now, skill can be a sports skill, shooting a free throw, kicking a soccer ball, specific sports skills. But from a strength and conditioning, sport performance standpoint, I'm going to say skill is going to be more of coordinating your body. Okay. It's going to be balance. It's going to be things like kinesthetic differentiation, movement adequacy. Can I execute certain tasks? Can I get my brain to get my body to execute certain fine motor skills or gross motor skills? That's going to be skill. The younger age groups need the most of that. Okay. Some people would call it body awareness. Okay. So we're going to really hammer in some of those skill components. And that could be as simple as they're doing a ladder drill and they land on one foot and got to balance. They do a ladder drill and then do a little 90-degree rotational jump and land. Fun little elements just sprinkled in to help increase their spatial orientation and their body awareness, and this perception of, can I execute certain movements, in a controlled way. So that's going to be a big bucket. Additionally, the younger kids, their aerobic system is prime in development. Okay. They actually use their aerobic system a lot. And actually, the glycolytic system is not really ready to go yet. Okay. So doing these high intensity type of conditioning methods for your pre-PHV kids is not going to be effective. You're not going to be making the most of your time. So we want to do more interval-based things that are aerobic style, okay? Like a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, a 1-to-2 work to rest ratio, a quick bout and a rest in the form of games or relays, okay? Additionally, muscular endurance is what we want to target for these younger kids. We don't want to do these low rep schemes of heavy weight, okay? Not because it's going to stunt their growth, but because that is not ready. Remember, neuromuscular system, okay? It's in development. So the more reps, the more practice, the more motor control we're going to be gaining. So we're going to be doing things like 2 sets of 20 seconds of a goblet squat. They're going slow and controlled. They're focusing on mastering the movement, the motor pattern. Or something like maybe week 1, we're doing 2 sets of 10. Week 2, we use the same weight, 2 sets of 12. Next week, 2 sets of 15. Next week, 2 sets of 20. Then we switch up the exercise. Instead of a goblet squat, well, maybe we're going to start working with a barbell front squat and doing something like that. Okay, so we're working on muscular endurance with those kids. And skill also plays into mechanics, and that can play into speed. We're going to target maximum velocity with the younger group, okay? Because that requires the highest coordination of motor patterns in terms of any athletic component of speed. It has the quickest limb frequency that we'll see, the least amount of ground contact time, okay? It is one of the biggest skills that needs to be laid down first through drills and through sprinting fast, okay? For those longer distances, 30, 40 yards for those younger kids. So those are just a few key points. There's a few other things going on there. Now let's start fast forwarding to the older kids, okay? So we're talking the post peak height velocity. Now the
older kids like past 13, something like that?
Yep. So now we're talking post-PHV. So kids that they've already hit their greatest adolescent growth spurt. Okay. Now, I didn't mention about the middle group. The middle group is going to be a blend of both of these things. Okay. So that's why I fast forwarded. So your young adults, aka post-peak height velocity. So this is typically your high school age, but let's remember our girls usually hit their peak height velocity around 11. So for girls, it's going to be late middle school. Okay. So this is where we're going to start loading the skeletal system. Okay. Their skeletal maturity is starting to reach its peak. Okay. They've developed their neuro part of the neuromuscular system. Now it's time to develop the muscular part of their system. So now we're looking at hypertrophy and max strength stuff in the weight room. Now we're looking at, okay, their maximum velocity mechanics. Those are going to now be enhanced because now they're going to have a greater stride length. Their legs are going to be longer now. So they're already going to be gaining speed through additional stride length. But another way that we can gain speed, whether it's acceleration or maximum velocity, is going to be force production into the ground. Once again, that's why we're going to be hitting max strength stuff in the weight room, because we're trying to increase maximal force production with this more developed skeleton, with this more developed neuro system of the neuromuscular system, and it's going to play a part into their speed. Instead of biasing more maximum velocity with these kids, now we can start doing a little more acceleration work and also resisted running work, because once again, force production, concentric explosiveness, okay, that all plays a part into resisted running type of things, all right? And additionally, something that I've noticed, and it's getting a little bit less popular, okay, but when I was going through school, it was all about acceleration. All the team and field sports, that's all they do is accelerating. So everybody should only be running with sleds, only doing 10-yard sprints. It's all about that, okay? Well, the thing is and research has shown this, look at Dr. Ken Clark, okay? He, sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach, he had this huge study on the 40-yard dash in NFL combine athletes. And what it says is, no matter if you're the skills guys or the bigs, if you're a little slow or the fastest guy out there in the combine, that your 10-yard dash speed is a constant percentage of your 40-yard dash speed.
Explain.
I can't remember exact number, but let's say 20% of your maximum velocity, your top speed is your 10-yard dash speed. So I take the number, I clock it meters per second of your 40-yard dash speed. 20% is your 10-yard speed, no matter if you're slow or fast. Okay, so what I'm saying is, and everyone can correct me, I don't remember the exact numbers, but I remember the main concept here is that if we raise the roof on your maximum velocity, your highest speed possible, we're going to raise the roof on your speed at 10 yards. Huge concept. And it makes sense. Think about your 1 RM on back squat. If I increase my 1 RM on back squat, I'm going to increase my 5 RM on back squat subsequently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing about, like, for us CrossFitters, there are some people think that they're having a hard time because they don't have good conditioning when they just got to get stronger.
That's correct.
If you can squat 315, right, you'll be able to squat a lot of 135s. I didn't know that it applies to like speed too.
Even speed, yeah. Yes. And it also applies into stamina or metabolic conditioning. Let's say a sport out on a field, okay? And I use this all the time with cross-country runners, okay, distance runners, that instead of running all this volume to try to get better, why not increase your speed, okay? Because your race pace is still going to be a percentage of the fastest speed that you can achieve. The specific things that you can look up is velocity at VO2 max and maximum aerobic speed. things are going to be a percentage of your maximum always. And if you can have a better handle on moving your body mass quickly, it's going to transfer over into the submaximal things all around. Let's say you have a soccer girl and you get her stronger. Well, her new self, her better, stronger self is going to be able to push her body weight out on the field way easier. So her former 70% pace out on the field, okay, might now be her 50% pace of her new improved self out on the field. And think about if she increases her speed and strength and the other girls out on the field do not. It's going to be easier to keep up with the other girls now that she's improved herself and the force that she's able to put into the ground relative to her body mass.
We're under the assumption, right, that they trained the right way. So in terms of like long distance, well, you still got to get your volume in, right? Assuming they got their volume in first and then train the speed part of it. Is that a safe assumption?
There's a couple different schools of thought. The short to long method and the long to short method. Both seem valid, okay? So
explain both.
Okay, so first one, the long to short. Classic. We want to build capacity. We want to build tolerance. We want to build resiliency in the form of building up volume and pushing the body a little bit more with how much it can push out in terms of mileage, okay? And then as we get closer to in season, we start to build on speed, okay? The race pace, okay? So classic, right? But what if we work on speed? Speed kills. What if we really increase someone's speed and then try to hold that speed a little bit longer? Hold that speed a little bit more longer, okay? And build volume through that way. And I mean, that's how, if we think about it in the weight room, that's what periodization does long term, is that we start with muscular endurance and hypertrophy, and we build a cross-sectional area that now we've got more motor units and more cross-sectional area to now build strength upon. Now I've increased my max strength. It's a part of a component of the power equation, okay? Now I can increase my power, and I do that, and then I start it all over again. Well, now that maybe I've increased my max strength and power, now if I do the same exact program and I start it back over at the hypertrophy and muscular endurance portion, I'm now pushing heavier weights. Maybe instead of the 30-pound dumbbells, I'm now hitting the same rep scheme with 40-pound dumbbells because I got stronger. Now, once again, we can push the muscle even more to grow bigger and handle more. Okay, so it's just part of the periodization scheme, and I could see that either way could go right, just depending on the situation.
So what does the data say on kids specializing way too early?
The data says no good, with the exceptions of gymnasts and figure skaters. And it's due to the nature of how the age of that sport is, especially going into the Olympics. Their career ends early compared to other athletes. Okay, their career starts early and it ends early for gymnasts and figure skaters. So they are a little bit of an exception, but that's only two sports. We got everybody else out there, okay? The data says early sport specialization, which the definition is basically 12 years old, you're doing one sport year round. That's the general gist of early sport specialization. Injury rates, because are just out the roof, okay? Because what's happening is you're having this repetitive overuse strain in this one plane, these one motions, this one sport year round, and it's starting very early on. So let's imagine a baseball pitcher starting at 12 years old. That's the only thing he does. That thing's going to blow out, because think about the volume and the reps and the strain through the developmental timeline on that one joint, okay? It's going to blow out. Whereas, what if he was a baseball pitcher? And then also, what if he ran track at some point? Or what if he did a little basketball or football? Now he's being exposed to multiple different planes of motion, multiple different movement patterns, and it's in this cyclical fashion throughout the year. So less likely he's just going to keep repping it out with the same exact motion over and over. and he's gathering other skills. He's working on different muscle groups, different joint systems. That's going to create this holistic, functional, kinetic chain motion. Additionally, his brain and eyes and coordination skills are also going to be developing. You want to create this breadth before you create depth. It's a range. You want a range in kids. Now, once they hit high school, that's when we're going to start picking one or two sports to start dialing it down. Okay, one or two. That's the suggestion once they hit high school.
One of the consequences too that I've heard of specializing too early is that there's this one kid who her parents turned her into a pro, quote unquote pro, in high school, and she was traveling all over the place. But when she went to a strength and conditioning coach, I kid you not, the coach said she couldn't do bodyweight push-ups. Have you heard situations like that where it's just so bad?
I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen, in fact, there was a situation recently. So, I'm trying to keep it, private. There was a signing day at a high school. Okay. 2 females signed to go play college soccer. Okay. 1 female only did soccer. Okay. And then her teammate did soccer and basketball. Okay. Well, I worked with the soccer only girl. She's going to be a college soccer player. You think she's, amazing and incredible. Can't do a single push-up. Can't even hold herself onto a bar to even think about doing a single chin-up. Cannot even hold her own body weight and grip it in her hands. Okay? Whereas the other girl, she's crushing it. She can handle her body weight a lot better. Okay? So the little examples like that, it's definitely apparent, and it sees that there's just basic foundational functional movements that are not being addressed in these pros. And also it'll lead to burnout. It's going to lead to burnout when you start them so early and the pressure is on. This is what you're dedicated to. This is what your life is going to be. This is your identity, is this one sport. Then they blow something out from overuse, overtraining, or psychologically they're burnt out from all of the pressure. Additionally, you max yourself out in a sport over time. What I mean by that is you don't learn anything new. It either becomes boring or you don't get that reward system, okay? Because for kids, learning something new, making new friends, that is rewarding. And if you're stuck on the same team with the same kids, playing the same sport year-round, less likely to have that reward compared to if you're doing multiple sports at the school, at the club, in a club, going and playing pickup basketball. You're going to be experiencing so much more with that. So less likely you're going to be burnt out physically or psychologically.
Speaking of burnt out, is there a general guideline to training, kids all the way to late teens to where they can still become top performers in their 20s, 30s, and even way in master's division?
Yeah, I would say following the long-term athlete development guidelines, that it's right there, but a lot of people don't know about it, is developing them appropriately, and here's a little concept and it's starting to get more popular of kids starting to lift weights earlier. Okay. And now I'll say this, parents, lifting weights isn't the only thing. They've got to have speed mechanic training and plyometric and power training from a professional that knows good form and technique. So I'll say that. But for simplicity, okay, lifting weights.
How do you go about doing that? Like, you go to gym to lift weights. Is there because gymnastics, you learn all that, and you learn all that as well in figure skating. But what kind of facility are we looking at?
We're looking at sport performance facilities, you
do it, right?
I do. Yes, I do sports performance. I've trained people in a couple different really nice facilities, and this was the setup. We had, I used to work at Michael Johnson Performance in McKinney, Texas, the Dallas area. And that's the best facility I've ever seen. We had a 60-meter track, 4 lanes, indoors, okay? We had a 40-yard by, I think it was like 30 piece of turf, okay? And then we had a half basketball court, and then we had a weight room. So that was just indoors. We had an Olympic-sized pool, and we also had a soccer pitch outside as well, so we had a lot of space to run and do things on. And even that basketball court, that's where we did our plyometrics. So you could really hear the sound energy feedback from the foot contacts. And we had a medicine ball wall, a concrete wall that you could throw stuff at. It was a really great setup. So ideally, parents should be looking to get their kids somewhere there, or getting a coach, a sport performance coach or speed and agility coach, taking them maybe once, twice a week out to a park where there's plenty of space to run around and train in. But if it's just a commercial gym, you're going to be limited, unfortunately. But hopefully we'll see in spaces like middle schools and high schools that there will be more certified strength and conditioning specialists as physical education teachers. That is the ultimate model. That is where kids are going to become good movers, not just lifting a bunch of weights and that everything is with a barbell or dumbbell. That is not the pinnacle of performance. That's not the pinnacle of human movement. Okay, that is just the horsepower and the motor coordination that's going to help feed into human movement patterns, jumping, sprinting, things like that we're going to need out on the field. And that's the greatest expression of athleticism long-term into your 20s, into your 30s, into your 40s, is these certain elements express your strength that you gain in the weight room.
They should be doing this in elementary school and middle school anyway. I think this should be the norm, right?
Oh, yeah. My vision and hope is that the state, the government, anybody that has curriculum or standards for who's qualified to teach physical education, the standard is going to be you have to be a certified strength and conditioning specialist or something, in line with that. You have to have your USAW, something that there's this understanding of movement quality and sport performance, because all humans were created to be athletes. That's how we've been able to build the log cabins. That's how we've been able to hunt for the furs, is by being an athlete, climb up a tree to get the honey, run away from danger. We were all born to be athletes. We got to get back to that. And it's obvious our current or former physical education system has failed us in that. People don't know what to do when they walk into a weight room, a gym, a commercial gym. We need to try to develop skills that is going to be done without team sports, post-high school, post-college, that people can do individual type of sports like powerlifting, weightlifting, doing some CrossFit stuff, or just going into a commercial gym, swimming laps at the, something like that. We've got to equip people with skills to be active for life. And it starts with creating quality movers.
Let's look at the other side of the spectrum. Are kids overtrained?
I think there's a high chance. But there's no, I've heard this before. It's not overtraining, it's under recovering. So I do think kids are under recovered. Our body is amazing. It can handle a lot, especially when we're young, especially the kids, right? But I can tell you this, the kids aren't getting enough protein. They are not getting enough sleep. They have tons of homework. They have the technological distractions that are keeping them up at night or taking away their sleep quality due to the blue lights. The environmental toxins are out the roof. You should see the vending machines at my school that I teach 3 PE classes at a day as a part-time coach. It's terrible. They're not getting the nutrients that our body was designed to take in. They're not getting the protein. They're not getting the sleep. They're not getting the hydration. They're sitting under fluorescent lights all day. It's a bad combination. that is wreaking havoc and causing inflammation, and not having an environment of healing and wellness and harmony to handle any demand of life. And it's starting that young nowadays. We're now we're seeing kids that are pre-diabetic, and they may even be active, but there's so many toxins out there that is contributing to this under recovering. So not too sure. I think for sure kids are under recovered. Maybe not overtrained, maybe overtrained, but under recovered.
Under recovered. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You want to switch gears to weightlifting?
Sure.
Yeah. So, because you're a weightlifter too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you go about teaching, lifts to athletes in their teens, 20s, 30s, and beyond? Is there a different way of teaching it depending on the age?
I would say, for the most part, no. For the most part, no. There's always going to be it depends, because there's no black and white answers when it comes to training humans. There's a Calvin and Hobbes comic that they're looking out into the distance, and he's giving them advice saying, there's no black and white answers in this life, that you got to become the master of the gray area. So I always say that. That's a thing that's my motto.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'd say it's going to be pretty similar, especially with the concepts of using derivatives and teaching progressions. And that's what...
Explain derivatives.
So derivatives, it's going to be portions of the lift. Think about learning styles. Typical learning styles is going to be part whole, or top bottom, or bottom top. Okay. So breaking down the lifts.
So the subparts in the lifts.
The subparts, the derivatives, the little small portions of it. Okay. So we're always going to start with little pieces and portions of the lift. And additionally, in order to ever be able to do a snatch, you got to be able to overhead squat, so we're going to start checking off the boxes. Can you overhead squat? Can you do a front squat, or at least a zombie squat?
Or can you squat?
Can you squat? Hey, can you do some of these things? Can you do an overhead press with the barbell before we ever do jerks? So we're going to need to check off those prereqs, okay, and possibly teach those first, or integrate them into the derivatives. For example, okay, so let's say I'm about to start some over the summer off-season football training with a high school, right? Well, we're not going to jump right into power cleans. I'm sure those boys want to, and they think they know how to, and I bet their sport coaches think they know how to, but I'm going to assume they don't. And so what we're going to do is we're going to be doing things like barbell high pulls, maybe from the power position, maybe from the hang position, okay, maybe from the safeties on the rack. Okay. Can you transfer energy through the chain? Because at the end of the day, that is what an Olympic lift is you have to transfer the movement through the chain. And that's why it's utilized in sport performance training. That's why it's going to be utilized in training a 50-year-old, because we want to utilize the kinetic chain in a functional, holistic way to transfer energy through the chain. Think about a high pull, and think about somebody loading up a heavy cooler onto the bed of their truck. They're transferring energy through the chain. They're not going to get that heavy cooler by just doing an upright row with it. They're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to use their legs to get it into that position and get it on the bed of the truck. So, that's the key thing is, can you transfer power? Can you get into these certain positions, the prerequisite positions? And then we're going to do little derivatives, high pulls, muscle cleans, muscle snatches. Okay, maybe a muscle clean to a front squat. We're going to start doing some complexes to try to integrate these movements together before we start doing some more higher intensity, higher complexity things like a full hang power clean, or a full hang snatch, or a full split jerk.
So what do you tell older adults when they say, do I really need to learn that? That seems like I'm just going to break my shoulder, especially when when they're seeing like the snatch, it looks pretty scary, right?
Right. Well, it's a whole body movement, and come to find out, the snatch has the highest amount of recruitment neurologically. So that means we are training the most out of the body with just one movement. I mean, it makes sense. That thing goes from the floor all the way up. So additionally, we know with decline of age that not only muscle mass, protein synthesis is going to start going down, but what goes down the soonest and quickest is your power output. So yes, you do need this, because if you want to stand up out of a chair when you're 80 years old with relative ease, you're going to regret not doing this. And additionally, oh, it's going to blow out my shoulder. Well, these movements, the best way to get mobility is to do it, a little bit of loaded. Of course, with a professional, we're not going to overdo the load. We're going to do something light, but it's like stretching with a barbell. Stretching with just your body weight alone isn't going to have the same neural pathway. It's going to be temporary with just your body weight alone. When we do something active that needs a little bit more signal neuromuscularly, there's going to be lasting effects. So trying to get someone into an overhead position over time, you'll see shoulder mobility improvements. The shoulder will have to adapt unless it's been structurally changed from injury or surgery. Of course, it's not going back after that point most of the time. So these movements will get you more mobile. It'll get you more stable. And it's going to increase this energy transfer through the whole kinetic chain, lower core, upper. And additionally, we are targeting the stretch shortening cycle in folks, okay, which is a highly neuromuscular in nature. And they're going to need that in the back of their pocket to do these daily activities, hauling the cooler up into the bed of the truck or sitting up out of a chair. That all takes an element of power. Remember, power, the meathead version of the equation for power, is strength times speed, So if you increase one or both of those qualities, life's going to be a lot easier for you.
The reason why Olympic lifts are a staple in CrossFit because of the benefits of it. I mean, it looks really cool when you see competitors do it, but when we see the normal people, we call them athletes too, because kind of like what you said with that definition of being an athlete, we call them athletes too. Like when we see them, like they develop their mobility, right? And they get stronger. I mean, it's not just like they just get bigger and stronger, but when you can see them like actually overhead squat, like, okay, that's pretty impressive for a 65-year-old, It's like, oh, that gives me hope.
It's achievable.
Yeah.
People look at it and think it's not, but it really is achievable. And I have a client right now who his goal, he's been training with me for 6 months now, and he's in his 40s. And I met him through playing volleyball with him on an adult league. He's actually pretty raw. Like, this dude he'll dive. He'll sacrifice his life to make the play. He's got that dog in him. But, he's that recreational adult athlete that's a desk sitter. And he wanted to overhead squat his body weight. That was one of his goals. And it's like, whew, we want to make a SMART goal here. The R in SMART is reasonable, but we can get you there. All right. And oh my gosh, the improvement in his shoulder overhead mobility, in his depth of his overhead squat is absolutely incredible. We've done snatch balances, we've done overhead squats, we've done muscle snatches, we're now doing full snatches, and it is just improved greatly. And I think we're on the road to getting him to overhead squatting his body weight, and he might just think that looks really cool, which it does look really cool,
Yeah, there's this guy that we, because I'm part of the Reddit thread on the CrossFit Reddit thread, and there's this guy who's he is still a games athlete, and he's like 70, in like the masters athlete, and he was like snatching 135. It's like, whoa, 135 at 70. I was like, that's wild, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then he's like doing muscle ups, like, yeah. You can still improve here's the thing about like people who turn 40, right? They think that's already a death sentence. That's you're getting old. Like, nah, bro, you can still improve. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who are still improving. So you can keep moving and keep developing your strength, speed, stamina, flexibility.
Just like 3 Days Grace said, It's not too late. It's never too late.
Yeah, exactly.
And here's a little shout out to my husband, Blake Brightwell. He said, act fragile, be fragile. And that's the mindset. A lot of these folks, even like you see it in your 25 and 30-year-olds, they're like, oh, I'm just broken now. No, you decided to drink beers when you got home. You decided to sit more. You decided to, not be active and eat a bunch of junk. And that's why you feel like you're broken and that you're just not in your prime anymore.
Yeah.
No, man, I feel like I started getting into my prime when I was 30, 29, 30. It was like, finally, I'm seeing such gains. My athleticism is going through the roof. I learned how to snowboard at like 28 years old.
And
now
I
we're
learned to
sending it off
snowboard at
double
35.
blacks. We're sending it off double blacks. We're in the terrain park, and we've only been snowboarding for 5 years. It's pretty incredible.
Correction. He wasn't 70, he's 60 or something like that.
Close enough.
Yeah, but still though, lifting it, it's pretty impressive for a 60-year-old.
Yeah.
So.
And it's like you could say, oh, he's got that dog in him. But maybe his fitness journey and his athletic, long-term athlete development through the course of his life of him not letting up, that is what makes him have the dog in him. It transforms your mind into what you're capable of. And you learn so many life skills through training.
You want to talk about periodization?
Sure.
You said this is fun. Okay,
Yes.
so is it similar? You actually mentioned this. So it's similar to powerlifting in, strongman, where, there's the hypertrophy phase and then so on and so forth. I'm not going to spoil it, but can you talk about some of the different periodizations that's commonly used in weightlifting?
Here we go. Here's the gray area. Okay,
Let's go.
so it depends. Okay, so there's going to be some things that we want to consider when it comes to periodization. And do we start off with the hypertrophy phase or do we not? So typically I'm going to say, yeah, we're always going to start it from the top. We want to have this tissue capacity. We want to gain some resiliency, some work capacity, grow the muscle, greater cross-sectional area, all the great stuff. However, when may we not want to do that? So let's think about, when is the next competition? I have a client who does one competition a year. She likes to do the lifts. She likes to stay active. She's a mountaineer. She plays some recreational volleyball with me. She is a skier, okay, and she's good. She's a good skier. Let's see. Oh, and then how we all met was because she was an ultimate frisbee athlete. Really good ultimate frisbee athlete. In fact, she went to nationals, so she wanted to work on her speed and agility with me. And then it transformed into, well, we need to get you on a proper, strength program to, hey, we're going to do the Olympic lifts because you're athletic and that's valid. Then it went into, hey, I really like these. And then I convinced her she needed to do some competitions. So she does one competition a year. For her, we got time. We got plenty of time to build this thing up. And, I would say that she hasn't reached the pinnacle or the ceiling of her strength or her muscle mass. She's had a massive body recomposition. Okay. But I think that she still has some room to gain some muscle, lose some fat kind of thing. So we've got plenty of time to do the whole start with hypertrophy and then get it all the way into competition prep where it's low volume, high intensity with our loads, right? But what if we only have 2 or 3 months? Well, we might not have time to do hypertrophy phase and get anything out of it, get any adaptions, because the duration of the time that we can do that phase might not be enough to get any adaptations before we have to roll into competition prep, right? So when is the competition? Additionally, weightlifting is a weight class sport, okay? So let's say we have someone that is extremely lean. They don't have much body fat to lose, and they want to either drop down a weight class or stay. Like they're on the edge of not making weight. Well, gaining more muscle might be bad for them. They're not going to make weight. But let's say we have somebody that wants to jump a weight class. Okay, maybe we want to get them pumped up, get some mass on them, and that tissue is going to be quality tissue that's going to help them push heavier loads. Okay, and let's say we have someone that, here's another thing, they have a pretty good amount of fat mass on them, and we know that they might need to do a little bit of a cut to get into the weight class that they want. It could be 3 kilos. It could be something, very achievable.
We're in the US. What's 3 kilos?
Well,
Freedom metrics, Kelly.
Weightlifting is a international sport. Okay. So is science. Science is an international, we use the kilos with things. But 3 kilos, that's going to be like 7 pounds.
7 pounds.
That's going to be 7 pounds. For most people that are athletic and active, losing 7 pounds is not a big deal. You can cut 5 pounds of fat or whatever it is, and then you can do a little water cut and get, we're talking like we're losing a 32 liter or 32 ounces, 1 liter of water from your body. Boom, you make weight. That's no big deal. But let's say they could lose some fat mass. Well, the strategy could be, we're going to try to get them to gain muscle mass. If we've got time to do this, we're going to try to get them to gain muscle mass to have a greater metabolism, caloric expenditure when they're just sitting down. So now if we go into a calorie deficit, it's not going to have to be a huge one, because now we've already upped their metabolism. Their daily expenditure by just hanging out is greater because they have more metabolic tissue now. Now the cutting phase is going to be super easy. The fat is going to melt off. Okay. And now they're going to be left with usable tissue. They're going to be a smaller version of themselves, but because they've lost fat, they're going to make weight because they've recomped, they've lost fat by increasing their metabolism and melting that fat off with just a very mild, a very conservative weight cut caloric deficit. So that's the answer. Is it depends on the time. It depends on the weight class. It depends on what their body composition is already at. Okay. And then I could even say maybe training age, that for those that are newbies to the sport, those that aren't super duper duper strong, that it's not going to throw a wrench in the whole periodization scheme. If we do a hypertrophy phase, we can get them prepped up pretty easy, especially if they're a novice. But for those bigger guys and gals, those more experienced guys and gals, those that have reached, that they are very lean, I'm not too sure if we want to go about that route, but it just all depends on some variables.
Because we got linear, nonlinear, scissor. Jackie was here and she forgot to tell me about nonlinear. You want to talk about that?
Nonlinear is going to be an undulating thing. Undulating means up and down. Okay.
Give an example.
So the up and down could be in terms of volume. Okay, so maybe 1 week or maybe for 2 weeks, it's high in volume and low, high and low. The undulating could be with intensity. High, moderate, low, high, moderate, low. Okay, you can see this kind of oscillating wave. It can be from week to week. It can be from day to day. Okay, and this is utilized a lot even in powerlifting. It was made popular big time with Westside Barbell. Okay, undulating periodization. And what it can do is it can really, it can keep it fresh for folks that might get bored a lot, because it's variable. It can also have this kind of regulatory way of not overtraining, because the variables are manipulated so much that you're not going to get just pounded with a load for all these weeks, or you're not going to get pounded with volume for all these weeks. So it can help even psychologically with this, I get kind of a break, So even knowing the type of athlete or the type of individual that you're programming for, you might want to start pulling these tools into play, because even certain seasons of life when people are going through a lot of stress, even psychologically, they got a newborn, they're going to move, they got a new job, then you may want to start pulling these things together to help them make it through and have these gains.
Yeah, because for me, like, with block, the week before a deload is it's extremely tiring. So it's
You're
like,
ready for it.
yeah,
You're
I'm ready
looking
for
forward to it. So you feel
Yeah.
that psychological factor too, the
Mhm.
physical and the mental. It's like, oh man, I need that so bad. And then kind of what you want to do is by the end of the deload or unload week, whatever you want to say, by the end of that, the person should be itching to get back to it. They're like,
Yeah.
they crave that heavy weight, or they crave getting just blasted with 10 reps on squat. That's kind of what you want. And that's why a postseason for many athletes, or a week off after a competition, is really important, because they get this mental and physical break, and then they're kind of ready to get back to it. And now they come in refreshed. Same thing with even periodizing nutrition plans, is that, every now and then someone may need to have a cheat day. If that's what is going to help them be compliant for the next week ahead, then maybe that's what needs to happen. Or if somebody's doing a massive weight cut for a weight class sport or a bodybuilding competition, well, having that a few days or a week where they're just doing whatever can be very helpful, because then they start feeling, they're like, man, I'm disgusted with myself. I'm ready to get back to the routine. Like, I don't like this feeling. I want to be in control of my performance and my physique, and my nutrition. So even undulating certain things, and that's what seasons of life is for too. You can't beat yourself up all the time if things are changing and undulating in your life. You got to embrace each season of life, and look for the silver lining in everything. And that's kind of how it is in phases of periodization too.
You want to talk about training next?
Yes, I want to talk about it all.
What are the signs that someone's overtrained?
Yeah, so overtraining syndrome, it's an actual term. So some main signs that you're going to see with overtraining is going to be, you have an increased resting heart rate. Perhaps, not in everybody, okay, but perhaps increased resting heart rate. Why? Well, that's telling me that the parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest system, is not turning on, that the other system, the fight or flight system, is on too much, okay? So another thing is, you're going to have some sleep disturbances, whether that's waking up frequently at night, or you feel absolutely exhausted, but then you can't go to sleep. It's like this weird paradox. You're like, I am absolutely beat down and I just want rest and recovery, but you can't get it. It's because, once again, the sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive. And what drives that system is the adrenals, okay? As a upregulation of heart rate, blood pressure, different in like epinephrine, adrenaline, those are released, and it plays on the sympathetic nervous system to dial up heart rate and blood pressure and all these things to get us to perform at a high level. But when we do that too much, it can't come down off of that, okay? So you'll see the sleep disturbances, appetite dysregulation. I'm really hungry at these certain times that I'm not usually, and then I'm just don't have an appetite when I normally do. Your warm-up sets feel like you're maxing out. That's a sign. I have this story. One of my athletes, he trained with me for pretty much all years in high school, or 3 years, almost all the years. He was a football athlete and track. Okay. And I also trained his older brother. So I had a good relationship with his parents and him. Well, he came to train with me one night at the gym, and we're getting ready to max out on his bench. It was either that week or the following week. We'd been building up to it. Okay. And I think this was almost in season for football. Okay. So school had just started. Maybe they hadn't played their first game yet. And so he's warming up on bench, and I've trained him forever. And his warm-up weight is a grinder. And I'm like, what is going on here? And he's supersetting bench press and deadlift. We're making the most of our time here with the time we got. And same thing for his deadlift. It is a grinder and it's his warm up weight. I'm getting concerned here. And so every time he comes over to the bench to do his set, hey, how's your appetite been? Yeah, it's really weird. Usually I'm eating, the whole entire refrigerator at my house, but now it's like I'm really hungry, but then I go and then I just like I start eating and I have no appetite. It's really weird. Oh, okay, gotcha. Goes and does a different exercise, comes back. Hey, what's your sleep been looking like? I'm starting to get an idea what's going on here. All the signs and symptoms, okay? So I contact his mom. I'm like, this guy's bonking. Something's got to change. Come to find out, his football coach was his PE coach, and he was ripping him in school with all this, strength training in PE. Then he was going to football practice, no telling how many hours per day, and then he was coming to me a couple times a week. And a couple times a week coming to me, that's fine. That's pretty minimum. But then when you're doing all this other stuff, now we're overdoing it. So I told his mom, okay, anything that is heavy, the coach needs to, or anything, you either need to cut the reps in half or you need to cut the weight like in half for 1 week, like an unload week. And then let's see what happens. So she emailed the PE coach / football coach, did what I said. The next week, he sprung up like a slingshot, and just, he blew up his bench. He hit over 200 pounds on bench. He hit over 400 pounds on his deadlift. The guy bounced back and came back with a bang just because we dialed things back. We reduced the volume. We reduced the load for 1 week and he bounced back, better. But he became a better version of himself from just that. Yeah.
Do you believe in HRV or HRV monitors, Garmin's, Whoops to monitor whether you're recovering or not?
I think it's a good tool. It's a tool. Everyone needs to know that there's a time and place for certain tools. Okay. And the thing about these monitors or activity trackers and whatnot is, okay, some people are saying, oh, they're not that accurate. Well, the thing is if you consistently use them, you tried to have this like kind of controlled environment where you're tracking it daily and having some consistency, then you're going to be able to take some data from it. Okay. And the thing about it is it brings this heightened awareness to people that we've never had before. But there's also this other side of it that people can become too obsessed and they can place their identity in how many steps that they achieved that day or how many calories they burned that day. So we want to be careful and not get obsessed, and we don't want to idolize these numbers and make our worth go right alongside these numbers. Okay, so that's my first thing. But I think they are great because it gives this heightened awareness for folks, especially people that's usually their main problem especially your general population people or your athletes that are struggling to achieve their physical potential, is that they do not have enough awareness and consistency. And it could be shown as, oh, they're not disciplined enough. Maybe they just need a tool to stay disciplined. Okay. So if we have somebody that they're starting their fitness journey or they're just now starting to have an activity tracker or a monitor, well, now, it's objective data of their sleep. They can't deny their sleep score. They can't deny how many hours of sleep that they took in. There's some people that don't, especially high school kids or college kids, they don't know when they went to bed or when they woke up. They don't even know. So now that it's on here, they have no excuse. How many steps did you get in? Now there's no excuse. Okay, I did cardio today or I did HIIT training, but your heart rate only got up to 115 beats and you're, a young person. No, you didn't do high intensity training. It's objective data. I'm all for that because when we get into our feelings, when we get subjective, that's when we don't see the results. So I'm all for it, but we need to use it as a tool, and we need to use it consistently, and it can really give us a lot of feedback. And there is some even higher level things. Some things I've used is the Omega Wave, is that you sit in a dark place with monitors on, and all of the data is hooked up to an iPad. I mean, but this was several years ago when I used this, so I'm sure there's something better now or it goes to your phone instead of an iPad, but it'll tell you what your physical readiness is of different athletic elements. Are you physically ready to do endurance training? Are you physically ready to do glycolytic lactate training? Are you ready for strength, max strength, speed? It tells you what you're most ready for and what you're least ready for. And so sometimes that's a good way for teams or coaches to modify the training. We can always train. We can always do something every day. But when we have a laser guided approach, then we can kind of auto-regulate this person to bring out the best in them on a daily and weekly basis based on their readiness. It's kind of the same thing with assessing people. Why do we test and assess people? Why might I see how what their broad jump is and their vertical jump is and how many push-ups they can? Why might I do that? So I can see where the strong points and the weak points are and see what we can bring up in this person. Okay, same thing with some of these wearable technologies. Where is the places that I can bring up today? And maybe those other things, maybe I can try tomorrow and see if I'm physically ready for those things. Also,
joints feeling bad, hurting, something like that? Not really. No.
Everybody's joints hurt every day in some way, shape, or form. Or they're feeling good, and then you start warming up, and they're feeling a little rusty. Or vice versa. Oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to make it through this lift. I start warming up. Wow, I feel really great, actually. You never know. There's been times that I have been sick and I've PR'd. There's been times that I have been really, really mad at a loved one and went and PR'd. There's times where it's like, where most people would be like, no, that's too much. I'm going to have a bad session. I shouldn't go and lift. I shouldn't go and do this, that, and the other. And they end up blowing things up. Same thing with my clients. They'll be sick as a dog. Hey, I'm sick. Do you think I should go train today? Yes, you should. Yes, you should. So anyways, it's just going to be an assessment. And I think anyone should always at least do a warm up. Okay. And that honestly, if you only have 15 minutes to work out, the best thing for you to do is perform a warm up, because a good warm up is going to increase blood flow to the tissues. It's going to increase mobility. It's going to increase stability in certain joint systems. Okay. And it's going to neurologically kind of get you pumped up a little bit, get you woke up a little bit, even for 15 minutes. So always warm up and assess what's going on. And you should probably train, but if you need to modify I'm going to cut my volume down, or I'm going to cut my intensity down, or maybe my range of motion is going to be cut down. Instead of full depth, maybe I'm only doing partials of things. There's so many different variables that we can tweak if somebody is feeling not up to par, okay? And I know you asked about the activity trackers, but really it's what's the applicable way when I'm not feeling so hot, when I'm not in my prime. And it's just the basic program variables. Maybe we want to increase rest time. Maybe instead of 2 minutes of rest between my heavy back squats, we're going to go up to 3 minutes, okay? Things like this, basic variables can be manipulated and we can still train on a daily basis. So if they don't have the wearables, they're going to need to assess themselves physically. Also, you can just take your pulse and see if your resting heart rate is higher than normal. Count your heart rate for 15 seconds, times it by 4. What is that compared to on other days? So that could be a very simple assessment.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about functional fitness, because we put that in the notes, right? When can it get flashy? Because you said like there's something about it being flashy and not functional anymore.
Yeah, when it's unsafe, that's definitely when it's too flashy. When there's no capability to load that movement safely, like if I'm doing a single leg balance on a Bosu ball while I'm juggling and also doing math, it's like, what's going on there? I think that's when it's getting too flashy, when it's obvious, when it's being posted on Instagram and TikTok. Like
you're gonna get ratioed.
when there is, I'm thinking there's this one person on Instagram, I don't even know their name, but it's like their client would do some type of like hamstring oscillation on a band and then would, do a burpee to box jump to a somersault to with a barbell over the head, just like crazy complex, like an obstacle course with free weights and boxes. Is like, what is happening here? That's when it becomes too flashy. And also it becomes too flashy when it gets outside of the definition of functional training.
Oh, what's the definition?
The definition of functional training is purposeful training. And that could look different for different populations, different roles, different daily activity, different goals. Okay, that can look different. Okay, but the very root of functional training is purposeful training. That's the definition from Mike Boyle's book, Functional Training for Sport. Okay, and I think that is a great, concise definition of functional training. So it's like when I see all this crazy, flashy stuff going on, it's like, is this person training to be a motorcycle? Like I've seen someone with an ab wheel on a treadmill, like they're holding, a long lever kind of plank with the ab wheel on the treadmill. It's like, is this person training to be a motorcycle? Like what is happening right here?
Yeah. So we get a lot, because CrossFit's like, it's one of the sports that people like to make fun of, but like the functional definition, because it came out a long time ago, 20 years ago. But Greg Glassman, the founder, was like, yeah, our definition for functional fitness is just, multi-joint. You use a lot of, it's compound movements and it's natural. Like it's super simple stuff. And that doesn't mean that we don't do curls. We love doing curls, but because we have 1 hour session every day, it's a short session, we go for those kinds of movements, like deadlifts. Yeah. So push press over curls.
Yeah.
Right. So that's it. It's pretty simple stuff. None of those things that you're talking about.
So let's go into functional fitness a little bit more. All right. So typically, just like you said, it's going to be more of those closed chained movements. So we're talking the feet are on the floor, or the hands are on the floor, or both the feet and the hands are on the floor. Or even, you could talk about any type of pull-up or chin-up variation, including your kipping, including your butterfly, including your muscle-ups. The hands gripping on it, that is also can be considered a closed chain movement, okay? Multi-joint, compound, lots of stuff going on, right? That is going to be considered the most functional, the most purposeful, because that's what's going to be going on in everyday life. That's what's going to be going on in sport. That's going to be what's going on if we wind it all the way back to 100,000, so forth years ago. People are going to be using those movement patterns to build shelter, to hunt, to gather, to do these things that require survival, okay? Climbing, what is required to survive for human physiology? That's the way our body was designed. That is very functional. That is very purposeful. Surviving is very purposeful. Okay. So what are those movements with that? And then, we can go a step further. Oh, so bodybuilders, they do a bunch of open chain movements, isolation exercises, single joint exercises. So that's not functional. Hold the phone. Some bodybuilders make hundreds of thousands of dollars showing their physique on stage. So I could argue and say that specific person, that is functional, because that's how they're going to provide for their family and make money in their specific role, in their specific sport. So I could even argue that bodybuilders doing these, less functional looking exercises, that actually is functional for that person. Okay. oh, doing bicep curls, that's not functional. But what if they have hypermobility in their elbow? Then there is a time and place. That is a very functional exercise for that individual, because if they hyperextend their elbow in an overhead movement, they're going to blow out their UCL and they're going to be out. What if they're an Olympic weightlifter that is high level? Well, that's going to really blow them out and really take them down in life and have to recover from that. So there's a time and place for that bicep curl if needed in that moment. So really functional is very dependent. It's purposeful training. And then I just want to go one step further. I want to even go down to a more microscopic level with this functional training thing. Is we need to think about the joint by joint approach, because training requires human movements. Human movements require joint systems and muscle systems, right? So at the very core of training is functional joints, right? So we have to understand this joint by joint approach. And it was popularized by Gray Cook. He is also developed functional movement systems, the functional movement screen, and also Mike Boyle popularized this concept in his book, okay? And what that approach says is that joints are stacked in sequence of mobile and stable joints, which allows for all human movement. If every joint was mobile, we'd be Gumby. We'd be like warm plastic, just all over the place, right? So, and if we had all stable joints, we'd be locked up, okay, motionless. So there's this beautiful stacking. Let's think about it. Ankle joint is a mobile joint. So for all you people that wear high top shoes or tape your ankles, watch out. The next joint up above that is going to be the knee joint. It's stable. It should only move front to back. If that thing is wiggling side to side, something ain't right in that thing. The hip joint is a mobile joint, ball and socket. You can throw that thing in a circle. Next joint up, lumbar spine. It's supposed to be very stable. That's what the purpose of doing things like planks, side planks, pull-off presses, carries, is we're trying to stabilize that joint system. So I'll just say this, if you are doing those exercises incorrectly, you are not doing the purpose of that exercise. You're not doing you're not functional training someone. A carry can look very functional. A plank can look very functional, but if the lumbar is sagging or if the lumbar is flexing to the side with that carry, you are getting zero out of it. You are doing the opposite of functional training. You are now creating dysfunction in that joint. So this is why it's important for trainers to know, and for people that do not have a science background or that don't have a certification or that haven't gone off and self-learned, that don't know these things, they're stealing money out of trainers' pockets. They are doing a disservice to their clients, even if they have good intentions. You've got to educate yourself. So I'll keep on going. The next joint up the chain from the lumbar spine is the thoracic spine, the T-spine, okay? That is supposed to be a mobile joint, flex, extend, rotate. Okay, so that's just, and then there's a bunch of other joints, but those are just a simple explanation in that if there is a dysfunction in a joint below or above the chain, the joint, for example, if your ankle is taped up and it can't move in a mobile fashion, the knee is going to take the force, okay? We might be blowing out some ligaments if we're not careful. If the thoracic spine is immobile, well then the scapulothoracic joint, your shoulder blade, that's going to cause pain and dysfunction perhaps, okay? So then we can't train at all. So we've got to make sure that we are addressing the functionality of these joints by assessing them or by training them in this fashion. And that's even a more microscopic level of functional training. Training with purpose, the purpose of these joints. What were they designed to do?
Yeah, as our sport, like weightlifting and CrossFit, they make fun of us because they think we're just sagittal plane warriors because that's where we're at. It's like, I mean, it's true, but then again, it's like, it is functional still though, you know?
Maybe that's But then we should encourage people to continue to maybe be multi-sport athletes into their adult years, because it's almost like this long-term continuum. It's like we need to be a multi-sport and do a bunch of different mixed abilities when we're young, specialize when we're in that like young adult phase, and then maybe we need to start going the other direction and do these multiple different activities into our older years. And I mean, it shows, it's like, well, we know younger populations are usually kind of the weak and frail people, and so is the elderly populations. It's this kind of continuum, this spectrum. So somebody like me, I'm a weightlifter, but I also I do snowboarding during the winter time, and it balances me out so well. And I don't sustain a lot of long-term injuries. I mean, maybe a little tweak here and there, but we get over it real quick and move forward, and we're still making PRs.
Yeah, with CrossFit, there's a triangle. At the very top of it, we encourage it's sport. It's like most disciplines, right? You got to have nutrition at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm,
And the very top of it, like we encourage other people to do different sports. So that's why if you see at the back, like we got a bunch of people who do rugby, they run. We got triathletes. Like it's nice to see them come here, get all their gains, and apply it in other sports. Like, and it's nice to see them like win those medals, podium. It's really satisfying, And they're like, they're getting healthier. They're being fulfilled.
Yeah,
it's a good thing. It feels good as a coach to see that.
It's such mixed abilities where they're, if someone has a weak point anywhere, it's going to be brought up because you're attacking multiple different movements, metabolic conditioning, strength, your power. You're attacking a lot of different of those elements and buckets, right? And so there's kind of something for everyone in terms of CrossFit. And I've done a little bit of, I've worked in a gym that one side was sport performance and the other side was CrossFit. And I would go over there and hit some workouts if the class number was really low. I was an intern. They're like, Kelli, you got to jump in here. Okay, I'll do what you say. And it's really enjoyable. And it's pretty incredible, some of the things that people can end up being able to do as they continue to go to CrossFit. And also, I'm a high intensity interval training kind of gal. I like that kind of stuff. And I even have worked with writing a certification with my company, Core Health and Fitness, a high intensity interval training certification. And so I think CrossFit's a good example of getting some of that high intensity metabolic conditioning and tapping in to the glycolytic system. And there's a lot of big benefits to tapping in to training that system for our populations nowadays.
Hey, thanks for watching or listening. It would mean the world to us if you like, comment, subscribe, or follow. I'm Clint with Parabellum Athlete, and I'll see you next time.